HR leaders, what's on your mind these days? Is it AI? Is it the economy? The talent market? Remote work? Retention? DEI? Pay transparency? New laws? Our 2024 Workplace Trends Report outlines how HR leaders are thinking about these challenges and what they believe will help their organizations overcome them. Want to find out what they said? Head on over to peoplemanagingpeople.com/Workplace Trends 2024 and download the report to find out.
Values. We hear this word all the time in our businesses or in our personal life. As a founder of an organization, you may have even put some together because somebody told you to as part of the journey that you need them. So you wrote some down by yourself. You maybe put them in an employee handbook or they're on a poster on the wall, but you don't really know what they are. You don't know what they mean. You don't know how to actually bring them to life every day. A cool story. I was talking with a few employees of a quite a large charity organization, and they said the values are lived and breathed every day. Even anybody in an organization can stop another worker and just ask them, "Hey, what value is showing up for you today?" And then they went on to recite them. I thought it was so cool to hear that an organization was truly embracing values, and it was really guiding the day-to-day decision. I wish I could say that this was the norm in organizations, but unfortunately it's not. Values just seem to be a buzzword. So how do we make them stick? How do we make them show up in our everyday? In today's podcast, we'll dive into the why of values and how to truly make them show up in your workplace. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Tim Reitzma, the resident host of People Managing People. Welcome to the podcast. We're people managing people, and we want to lead and manage better. We're owners, founders, entrepreneurs. We're middle managers. We're team leaders. We're managing people, and yes, we do human resources. But we're not HR, at least not in the traditional sense. We're on a mission to help people lead and manage their teams and organizations more effectively. So if you want to lead and manage better, if you want to become a better organizational leader and more effective people manager, then join us. Keep listening to the podcast to find the tips, tricks, and tools you need to recruit, retain, manage, and lead your people and organization more effectively. And while listening to the show, please subscribe and join our mailing list on peoplemanagingpeople.com to stay up to date with all that's going on. Thanks for joining me today, Tanya. It's a pleasure to have you on again.
Oh, I'm so happy to be back, Tim.
Yeah, it's. I think this is the third podcast now I've done with HTI Institute or with yourself. We did one with you, and then with you and your co-founder, and now you're back on. And as I mentioned to Matthew, that you and Matthew are resident guests of People Managing People. So thanks for all your support.
Oh, we enjoy it so much. It's always fun to have these conversations, and I think I get as much out of it, if not more, than your viewers do.
That's awesome. And, today's conversation is about values. And I didn't actually Google search this, but I'm sure that there are thousands of podcasts on values. But this one is going to be a little different because we're not just going to talk philosophically about values, but we're going to actually talk about how do you actually make them show up every day. But before we get into that conversation, you've got a new book out. So let's fill us in with that. Tell us what it is, what the book is, and what it's about, and where could we find it?
So thanks for mentioning it. That's great. Our book is called The Art of Relationship-Based Leadership, and the front title is called Lead from Your Heart. And that's really the focus, is how can we emerge as leaders and lead from our heart? Because what we believe is that relationships form the basis of everything. And without being in proper relationship, both starting with the relationship that we have with ourselves and then moving outwards with others, we really can't lead others, and we can't set intentional direction. And we basically, without the attachment, we can't get to the goals that we want to and get others to buy into it. It's available on Amazon as a print book, and it's also available as an ebook through every traditional channel. So Amazon, Chapters, Indigo, all of the Kobo, all of those.
That's fantastic. And congratulations on that milestone. I know it's been a journey to get the book out, and I've read a couple chapters, and it's fantastic. And so kind of a plug for HTI Institute. For anyone listening, check out that book and also check out HTI Institute's website. I think you'll find a lot of value there. So as we make this conversation kind of flow into values, I think we can't have a heartfelt or lead from a place of relationship without values. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And that's why the third chapter of our book, Lead from Your Heart, The Art of Relationship-Based Leadership, is focusing completely on values. They are such an integral part of any relationship. And it helps to form the boundary around to help define who we are and who we aren't.
And so I'm going to put you on the spot. What is one of your core values?
So one of my core values is integrity. It's huge. It's probably my number one value.
Okay. And so how does it guide you in your day-to-day?
It basically, I know when something's not right if I start getting a kind of a queasy feeling or something seems out of alignment. So for me, integrity, and that's when I know that the integrity value is being transgressed, whether it's by myself or through an interaction that somebody else is, it doesn't feel authentic. And so for me, integrity it's kind of the catch-all word for a whole bunch of other things, which includes, doing my best, transparency, honesty, doing what I say I'm going to do, trying to inspire others to do the best that they can do. So it is a catch-all for a whole bunch of other things. But when I think the word integrity, I myself know that it's a catch-all for all of that.
And so would you say that values can be a bit more high level, a catch-all versus, very specific?
Well, I think it's specific, but I think one word, there has to be almost like a backstory. There's the fleshing out. The word is the key word that tells you what does it mean? Because often we can start grouping a whole bunch of different values together, right? They're kind of they become a values glom or values ball, right? Because they're so similar. And then one will stand out as the one that kind of encapsulates all the stuff below it. And so it is specific, and there's a story and a backstory that goes into it. So it's bigger than just that one word, which may be only a few words, like one sentence or a couple sentences definition, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so, we kind of want to move so for personal values, but I think it also relates to company values or organizational values. And I've had an opportunity to do some consulting with organizations who were on this journey of redefining their core values. We'd go in and I'd ask the senior leaders, hey, what are your values and what do they mean to you? And I'd usually get blank stares or, avoid eye contact. So don't ask me that question.
Right.
And so why is it so important? And why, I guess a different question is why do so many organizations misunderstand the importance of values?
So I love that you're asking this. I was just writing an article on this yesterday, and it really touches on that point of people think values are fluffy, right? And it's one of those soft skills or those soft things. And what do we really need them for? And what I truly believe is that values, when they're operationalized, can become an organization's biggest source of strength. It becomes their strategic advantage in a way. And that's what the backstory is. Like when you were asking me, well, what are those other things? Is it just a bunch of things? No, the backstory is the operationalizing of it, right? What does it mean to actually put it into action, right? So let's say when I said integrity is my number one value, and inside of that is transparency. Well, that means, right, being clear on what I'm saying and really being transparent about all my interactions when I'm dealing with my clients, when I'm dealing with friendships, when I'm dealing with my family, and not hiding things, not sidestepping things, and really being clear on what I'm saying, right? And it's the same things for companies. When they can start to operationalize those values and put that backstory in and understand it, it allows them to actually enact them and apply them on a day-to-day level.
So I think you probably can anticipate my next question then is, and I'm sure our listeners are saying, are asking this as well. How do you operationalize them? So you've got a word like integrity or transparency, and how do you operationalize it? How do you make it practical, or do we need to?
Well, I think this is in a way a two-part answer. One is that to come up with words that reflect who we want to be, there has to be some work done beforehand. And so some of those what I'm calling the backstory would have emerged there, right? So it would be through in interviews and talking with people and really thinking about how do we want to show up, right? So all of those stories that people say, oh, I love it, when we do this, I feel really good as an employee, or customers have given us really good feedback that this is what we're good at, and some stories that really show in concrete, practical terms. The value would be the word that encapsulates all of that.
So it's not necessarily working from the top down of, okay, what here's a list of words, which words resonate with you. It's kind of looking at your operations and saying, okay, well, what are we doing now that we're proud of? Or how do we make decisions, or what guides our decisions? Would you?
Absolutely. And it can also be, and who do we want to be more of? Where are we falling short? What are we missing? So it's two parts of the story.
Yeah, it's not just, okay, we're awesome, so this is why we're awesome, and let's put those words down. But it's also aspirational, right?
Absolutely.
And I think, if we were 100% perfect all the time, then it would be easy to live in integrity. We wouldn't have a problem with that. But, I would argue, and maybe on another podcast, that we're not perfect all the time. And, but if we make a decision and it doesn't feel right, we can also use our values to, look in retrospect of, okay, well, why am I feeling the way I am? Did I violate something in my own value set?
Absolutely. So what we talk about a lot in our book, Lead from Your Heart, is that values are really a great indicator. So once we know what our values are, they are, as you said, aspirational. They're things that we're always striving to move closer towards. And they can also be a big indicator to let us know when something is out, when we're so far out of alignment with our values, we don't feel well. And for organizations, that can happen for individuals, and it can also happen by feedback from clients, customers, service providers, right? Mm-hmm. And bottom line dollar results can start telling us, oh, well, we say we're this, but something's not working because the feedback is telling us differently, right? So they do tell us where we're out of alignment, and they provide us with a goalpost of where to move forwards towards.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's not just, static or this is how we're operating today. So, but it's something that, we want to move forward. We want to hit that goalpost. We want to pursue that mission and that vision. So, okay, so we've talked about values, and how do we, as an organization, identify values? Is it just the founder in his office or at his desk just writing down a couple words, or is there a process to identifying or re-identifying values?
I don't think it's one size fits all. So I think it really depends on how it can evolve. So it could be a matter of, okay, somebody decides this is really important. A company was small, it evolved without values. Nobody ever really thought about it. They've done well relatively. And as they grow, somebody says, actually, we really need to start thinking about values. We need them to bring us to the next level. And at that point, it's great to have input from everybody. So a perfect example of this would be the company Amgen. Do you know them?
No, I don't.
So they're a huge company in the States. They're a biotech company, and they've been super successful over the years. And they had started out doing really well. And at one point, one guy realized, well, we don't have values. So he just kind of started this project off the side of his desk. And he's like, well, I'll just kind of think about who we are and write something up. And I guess somebody higher up, I don't know if it was the VP or the president, said, actually, this is too important. We can't just throw this together. And so they started an interviewing process and gathering feedback from every single employee. And got all these stories about who are we, what makes us different, what makes us excel, and then started whittling it down. And the process took 2 years. So it can be a longer process, and it can also be a much shorter process. It could be a company starts off really small, and, the founding group decides, well, these are our values because they reflect who they want to be and how they want to grow as a company. And then maybe these become revisited as the company grows and shifts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. It's not a one size fits all. I mean, if you're a founder listening to this and you've got a small team of a few people who've been on this journey with you, yeah, ask them, sit down, have a conversation about what makes your organization unique. What do you stand for? What guides decisions? And very quickly you will find you'll find values, and they may not be the exact word, but or not two people may be using different words, but that's where you can correlate them together. And just as you were explaining, Tanya, of transparency fits under integrity for you, whereas somebody else might say transparency, and that's it. Like it's that's the value. So there's not a one prescription that fits with this. However, I like that approach where you've got an organization made up of people, and they come to work every day for some reason. And so why not ask them? Why not ask, what keeps you coming? What keeps you coming and doing your work? And where are we excelling? Where do we maybe need some help in our business or in the growth? And you'll uncover some trends in value words. But you also might uncover that there may be some misalignment. And so what happens then if there's misalignment?
I think that's a great question. I think when values aren't something that you can impose on someone, they have to be claimed by the individual. And so there's two parts to this. One is, let's say there's a company and they've got values and they see that there's misalignment with some of their employees. Part of it may be looking at, well, what are those employees' personal values? And how can we explore and do some work around seeing if there's overlap between their personal values and the company's values? So it's kind of having conversations, digging a little deeper, doing some education, and seeing where you can find alignment. And sometimes it's just a matter of it's not a good fit, which is great to know, because both for the employee would want to be in a company that reflects their values, and for the company, they want employees who can buy into their values and who reflect and embody them.
Mm-hmm. I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here. So that seems like a lot of work. Seems like, it's a lot of work to dig into individuals, their values, and maybe some misalignments. And so, we're too busy. We don't have time for this. Do you ever come across people that have that reasoning or excuse, and how do you overcome that hurdle? Because I'm sure people are listening going, oh, that seems great on paper, but how do we actually get this done?
Totally. Well, it is work, and it does take time and money to do. And, I think for a lot of people, a lot of companies, they think, well, it's fluffy, right? What's the actual advantage of doing all this deep work? And so here I want to come back to Amgen again. And they are a company who, as they up-leveled and developed their values, they became even more successful. And what it allowed them to do is to start hiring people who really fit with their culture and their mission and their vision, and who wanted to embody these values. And as they did it, they became even more profitable. And it would guide decisions. So what they'll do is, for example, when they are looking for prospective employees, they'll take them out to lunch with the whole team. And what they'll be looking for is not necessarily competence, because obviously if they've made it to that level, they've got a certain amount of technical expertise and competence in the areas. What they're looking for is there a values fit, right? Because they know that if somebody can fit in with the values, they will be costing the company less through retraining. They will be more productive. They will fit in more seamlessly, and they will be making the right decisions in line with the company's overall goals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it actually just reminded me of an organization called O2E Brands. And a lot of people don't necessarily know that company, but under that company is 1-800-GOT-JUNK.
Yeah.
And Brian Scudamore. And he has said numerous times in his book, as well as all over social media, that when they hire people, they before they bring somebody on, they ask the question, they do a barbecue and beer test, a burger and beer test. Would you sit down and have a beer with this person, or would you invite them to your barbecue for a burger? And if the answer is no, then okay, we need to dig into this. Why? Like there's a reason and a misalignment somewhere. If the answer is yes, then they're a potential good fit because maybe they fit the values organizations of authenticity. I don't know if that's one of their values, but if it is, and somebody comes across as truly authentic, then there's alignment. And so, yeah, it's a lot of work. However, just simple research online of values-driven organizations and how they outperform the stock market and how they outperform competitors, it's astronomical. It's work that needs to get done. It can't just be we'll get to this in year 5 of our organizational growth. No, it needs to happen now.
Totally. Two of my favorite companies are for values are Starbucks and Patagonia. And you see them living their values again and again and again, even when it's not easy, when there's an immediate cost to them doing so. And over time and over the long run, they've been incredibly successful, regardless of the interwoven points where it may be not cost efficient to live the values, and there may be some short-term pain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, both great examples. And Patagonia, I love the organization and what they stand for, and how decisions are really driven. And it may curb their financial growth. However, it drives their decision and their hiring process. It's fantastic. And so, so we talked about how the importance of values and how to identify values around your organization, talking to different people, talking to customers, what do they like about you, and internally asking people, why do they show up every day? So we've talked about the importance, we've talked about the how, and okay, so now you've got them, and do you just write them on a wall? Do you put them in the employee handbook? How do we hold people accountable? And accountable is a strong word, but how do we hold people up to those values?
I think that's a great question. And it's really a matter of not just letting it become wallpaper, right? And so there can be things like calling people out, like shout outs when people go live into a value and pointing it out to others. It can be a matter of employee recognition on different levels, right? It can be part of the annual reviews. How well are you living into the values? Where are you falling short? Where do you have some work to do? It can be part of the promotional process. There's so many different aspects of how can you start incorporating them so that they become alive and well.
Yeah, I worked at an organization that created a shout-out program around the values. And I left that organization years ago, but I still know the values. So they're ingrained in me. And they were, written everywhere on T-shirts on the walls. But the CEO of the organization and his weekly, he would email thousands of people a weekly update. And he would pick one of the values and tell a story about it. And by the end of the week, he would cover, all of the values. And then the next week would come and he would tell other stories about the same values. And so by a month into it, maybe we were a little sick of the values, but we understood them and we could tell stories around those values, which was hugely important. But it also caused at least me to think, am I aligned with these values? Mm-hmm. And the answer was yes, totally. So we had a shout out program where we had the values listed down. And if we saw a team member or somebody in the organization living that value, we would fill out a little card and it would go into a monthly draw and for a small prize. And it it drove a lot of camaraderie, and I think it was good, but it also helped drive decisions. We would use it in our executive meetings. If we were looking to make a decision, we would say, okay, is this compromising one of the values? And if the answer was yes, well, then we'd have a conversation about it, and maybe still pursue going forward. But we had a documented conversation, or in some cases, we would abandon that train of thought because we couldn't go on, knowing that it was leaving us in a bad place. So how do you hold people accountable? So there's lots of stories of organizations who had values of integrity and employees did things that weren't good. Maybe sold product to people they shouldn't have sold product to, or, were even maybe a value of teamwork, but they embodied individual contributor to the point where they didn't care about their team. So how do you have that conversation with people?
I think it's a matter of being very clear. It's kind of coming back to your point before about how values are used for decision making, right? I think that's really important. It's kind of, well, what do the values say? So if people are not going to be held accountable to the values, they become meaningless. And if they're built into the regular feedback times and annual reviews and all of that, it becomes just part of the culture. And that's what it needs to be for them to become living and breathing, right? It's not just something that pops up at review time, not just something that pops up when there's an issue. It's every day, how can we do it? And a manager can also have meetings with their team on a weekly basis. Which value are we really going to look to embody this week, right? Which one are we going to look to bring to life? So there's all kinds of things. Teams can do the same thing. And there's all different ways of bringing them to life and actionalizing them.
Mm-hmm. And so I've got personal core values and you have your own personal core values and our organization has core values. Do we then need core values for our teams? And how granular do we get? And so, this is something that a question that came up in an organization I was part of is, we've got the super high level values of the organization, but let's walk through that for a couple minutes.
I think that teams who want to make values for themselves, I think it's excellent. The one thing that I would say is the same way that individuals' values and organizational values, in order for there to be a good fit and for people to feel good about living into those values and actualizing them, that there has to be an overlap. It's the same thing with a team and the larger values. And there's a certain level where they also have to have some kind of an overlap with the individual team members' values.
Yeah, I think just as an example, I'm just making up this example, but if an organization had a value of integrity and then you had a sales organization within that company had a team value of win at all costs, right? Yeah. Which one would you follow, right? They compete in a way that it's like, black and white. They do not match. And so if you are listening to this and thinking, okay, maybe I should set up some values for my team, yeah, definitely it's worth it. You also need to ensure that they're in line with the organizational values. So you're not causing any issues. Yeah.
Right. So to your point with that team, something that would work would be in winning through the lens of integrity.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or, a customer first or something like that, something that still holds the essence of the corporate value. And, regardless if you've articulated personal core values or company values, they're still shining through. If you don't think you need to articulate your company values, well, guess what? Your company does have values. And whether they've been articulated or not, they're there. And so they still shine through. And so it might be worth to take a good hard look at what is shining through.
Totally. And I think that brings up a really good point is when we can be clear on what our values are, we can be clear on, is this what we want to shine through or not?
Yeah, I like that. It's there's some things that you might not like that are shining through. I was consulting with an organization who had hired someone. They were on paper a rock star, came from a huge management consulting company. But after a conversation around values, this organization and this individual, they just did not mix. What this individual thought was needed to shine through was not what the organization needed. And they had to part ways. And it was unfortunate. However, I'm sure both the individual and the organization were a lot happier after it happened. So hard decisions, but you need to take a hard look. So
yeah, I think that brings up a really good point. It's kind of coming back to that example from Amgen is, one time, and once the values were in place, and this is part of the whole accountability piece and good fit, it's, one of the senior VPs had hired an employee, and not long afterwards, the manager fired them. And so the VP comes down and he's like, well, what'd you do? I personally hired this guy. And the manager's, look, he's completely violating our values. And then the senior VP is like, oh, okay, you're totally right. Right. And that's the accountability piece and the living into it, even when it's not convenient.
Yeah, I love that. And I think, as we look to kind of wind down the podcast, I think that's a fantastic point, Tanya, is, if you're leading an organization, take stock of who is part of your organization. Are things being compromised? Are you just letting things go without saying anything? It's now time to articulate the values and drive that accountability, and in a fun way. It doesn't have to be such a downer of, oh shoot, I'm not living a value in this very moment, so how do I actually put one on my screensaver to show my boss that I'm actually thinking about the values. But it needs to, even setting up values need to come from a place of integrity and a place of authenticity. I think that's the important thing. Is it's not just all aspirational, like we're on one end of the spectrum, but we want to be on the other end of the spectrum. Having a couple of those are great. But it's also, how are you living today? And if you don't like how you're living today, then things need to change.
I could not agree more.
Perfect. So there you go, listeners. We've talked about the importance of values. We've talked about how, as an organization, to quickly identify a couple of values. It could take a couple hours. It could take a couple of years. There's no clear-cut process. And we've talked about the why. Why is it so important? And how can it guide your organization? So any final thoughts, Tanya?
No, I think that's it. I think, actually, as a final thought, just if our listeners have not thought about what their personal values are, it's a great time to start thinking about them. Knowing our personal values sets a stage for us to make better decisions of who we want to be and to bring ourselves into alignment with that.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we could do a podcast just on personal core values and really get into how do we identify them? How do we identify core values? And, I think one question I'll kind of tease our listeners with is, when you are thinking about your own personal core values, think about, if money or time wasn't an issue, what would you be doing in your life? And another question is maybe what is your superpower? What would your superpower be? And start listening for value words such as curiosity or fun or impact or integrity or transparency, whatever it is. But I'll leave it there. So thanks for tuning in. Thank you again, Tanya. We will definitely be talking to you again soon. And if those who are listening like what they heard, please give us a rating on our podcast as well as subscribe. We'd love to also get your feedback. And if there's topics you'd like us to cover, shoot me a note and we'll definitely get that on the podcast. So with that, everyone, take care and we'll talk to you again soon.